Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Sarah Curot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2011 sports comedy titled Goon. Now, Goon runs for 1 hour and 32 minutes long. It is directed by Michael Dowse. It is produced by Don Carmody, David Gross, Jesse Shapira, Andre Rouleau, Jay Baruchel, and Ian Dimmerman. The script was written by Jay Baruchel and Evan Goldberg. The score was done by Ramachandra Borkar, the cinematography by Bobby Shore, and it was edited by Reginald Harkema. And the stars of the movie are Scott Stifler himself. Yes, I'm talking about Seann William Scott. Also joining the cast includes Liev Schreiber, Alison Pill, Jay Baruchel, Marc-Andre Grondin, Eugene Levy, David Paetkau, Kim Coates, Richard Clarkin, Jonathan Cherry, Ricky Mabe, famous enforcer Georges Laroque, and Curt Keilback. Now, in hockey, you ask yourself, who are the most important members of a team? Some may argue that it's the goalies. I mean, after all, they spend all three periods, protecting the net to make sure that no goals are scored. It's a tiring, laboring, stressful job, and if too many goals are scored, then it's the goalie that'll get, the bulk of the blame for why the team lost. So, they're the most responsible players on the ice. Some people might say it's the forwards. I mean, it's the forwards' jobs to score as many goals and to provide as much offense as possible. And then you got the defense who literally have to have eyes in the back of their heads, as, their jobs is to protect the goalie so that the forwards don't try to score goals on them, and also to assist the forwards in scoring the goals. Whereas the forwards are the ones responsible for scoring the goals, it's up to the defense to be the ones to provide the essential assistance to the forwards. So each position, whether it be a center, a winger, a defenseman, a goalie, an enforcer, a goal scorer, they all contribute in their best possible ways to make our game exciting, to make our games unpredictable, and to just have an excuse to root for whichever team of your choosing. So with all that said and done, you have the most, but then again, people often wonder, what is the most overlooked members of a hockey team? They are the enforcers. The added muscle to the tough sport that is hockey. And you ask yourself, what is their function on a hockey team besides muscle and publicity, both good or bad? The answer to that is they're the protectors of the other players, and they are there to fight with the other muscles on the opposing teams. Such well-notable enforcers, or as they're often referred to as goons, include guys like Bob Probert, Marty McSorley, Ty Domi, Chris Nylon, Zdeno Chara. Hell, even players who can actually score 40, 50 goals can still also duel it on the ice. I mean, take for example, Rick Tocchet. I remember Rick Tocchet growing up in the 80s and 90s. I mean, this guy was a guy who's a fighting machine. I mean, the guy can score 40 goals, and yet he could still kick, ass just like the other enforcers on the team. Hey, Rocket Richard had gotten into a few rumbles in his pastime. Jerome Aginla, he could also duke it out and score 40 and 50 goals a season. Hell, even Mario Lemieux can be kind of a big, tough, strong guy when given the chance. I mean, he wasn't some goody two-shoe like Wayne Gretzky or Mats Naslund. No. When it comes to like goons or enforcers, these guys are the muscles. These guys are the ones that are trying to, protect the more, dedicated skaters who could score goals. I mean, that's what their responsibility was. It wasn't just, pick a fight and then start throwing punches. Sure, that's their main purpose, but it goes more beyond that. These guys are the ones who tend to also be more known for spectacle than they are for sport. Now, they are not known for their skills as players who can skate, score goals, and that are defensive. No, they just go on to take down rivals and sit in the penalty box for 5-10 minutes. And sure, there were some exceptional goons who were capable at scoring goals, like as I mentioned before, Rick Tocchet, Cam Neely, Jerome McGinley, even Mario Lemieux and Rocket Richard. But most of the goons, as you mentioned, are not really skilled at hockey, but they just depend on muscle to carry the teams forward. And now, though there's no awards winning for most minutes in a penalty box, still, if it wasn't for these hotheads and for these muscly guys, a lot of star players could end up being put on the disabled list. Now, as much as I often praise the players who score a lot of goals or get a lot of assistance and are very strong as defensively as they are offensively, one of the reasons I enjoyed the movie Goon was because it definitely pays homage to the artistry of being an enforcer who in the past gets dismissed as being talent-deprived thugs who are just on to fight with members of an opposing team. Well, there's a lot more to that. To bring down the competition so that their team has an upper advantage for the win. That's what the main purpose of being an enforcer on a team is. And sure, they're often nicknamed as goons. Well, it just goes to show you that that kind of terminology can be somewhat both kind of offensive and also a bit ignorant to what their main purpose is. And sure, they may not score 30, 40 goals a season. Well, some do, but they're not really out to do that. They're not really out to go out on ice and to oh, sure, they'll have their moments of scoring goals and putting in the puck, but very few and far between. Their main purpose is just to go out there and duel it out with another enforcer on an opposing team. And they're not doing it, for show. They're doing it to protect the other goal scorers. Because if they don't do their job, then the muscles on the teams could end up injuring the goal scorers, the prima donna types. Well, I don't want to call them prima donnas, but, the ones who are not capable at fighting. The more, not necessarily weaklings, but the ones who are not prone to fighting. The Lady Bing types. That's what their purpose is. So here we have Seann William Scott. He stars as Doug the Thug Glatt, who is a bouncer who gets hired on the spot to be an enforcer for a minor league hockey team in Massachusetts. One of the qualities that makes Goon stand out is that Doug might be good at beating people up, but that doesn't really make him toxic or let alone a bully. He gets hired on the ice was when he and his friend were watching a hockey game live. And then all of a sudden, his friend started, like doing a bunch of cat calls and put downs. Then one of the hockey players comes off the ice, confronts his friend, Doug's friend, in the stands, and starts slurring off homophobic remarks. And then all of a sudden, Doug Glatt, who doesn't take homophobia very lightly because, the fact that his brother happens to be gay, well, then he just practically beats the shit out of this confronting hockey player. And then, because of his muscle, he was eventually hired by this minor league hockey team as their added muscle. And like I said, just because they're fighters on the team doesn't mean that they are like that in real life. In fact, maybe some of these enforcers are probably one of the most kindest, sweetest people you'll meet walking down the street. They may look like a threat or an imposing figure on the ice, but once you meet and greet them, they all pretty much have a heart of gold. Doug Glatt is just one of those. He is not toxic, and he is not a bully. In fact, he could very well be a thug with a heart of gold. And even though he comes off from a well-defined family of academics, he is actually the black sheep of the family, being that he's not exactly what you would call academic. In fact, sometimes, even though he shouldn't really do this, but for the record, he does. And sometimes he even actually does admit it himself that he is an underachieving loser. Not my words, but unfortunately, those are his words. He knows the circumstances. He knows what he's like. He knows himself well enough to admit it, even though we all want to deny it, and even I want to deny it. I don't think he's an underachieving loser. But I guess since he doesn't want any free passes or any sympathy cards saying, no, you're not a loser, even he admits it himself that he is one, even though I tend to disagree. And though his family still believes he has potential, Doug tells them off that he's not. No, and that's not that he's trying to be modest. He just knows who he is and is not ashamed to admit he's dumb, and that with him wearing a hockey uniform and being hired to hurt players, he may have found his true calling. And he just doesn't want to let this opportunity down. He's minor league hockey. Sure, he's not getting the same kind of money as an NHL player, but as a minor league hockey player, probably this might be the most money he'll ever make in his lifetime. And I guess he just doesn't want to lose that opportunity. And though, of course, we'll all like to say, no, you're not a loser, he doesn't want any free sympathy passes. He doesn't want your praises. He is willing to accept that he's dumb and doesn't make any kind of denials or anything like that. I mean, these are just his own words, his own personal thing. I'm not trying to be insensitive or anything. I've never said I was a genius. I've never said that I know all answers. I mean, I'm smart, but I'm not a genius, and I never said I was. But at the same time, Doug even admits that he's not an overachieving academic like the rest of his other family members are. And that maybe putting on a hockey uniform, going out there on the ice and beating people up, this is just something he's organically good at. And that maybe he won't do it in the public spectrum. To him, this is a job. And he's getting paid. And he's getting paid a lot for doing something that doesn't require rocket science or skill or anything like that. He's just hired muscle. Muscle for hire. That's the best way to say it. And that he has found his new purpose of life. And if he admits it, good for him. We'll stand out for honesty. Though I don't agree with him putting himself down like that, but, if this is what he truly thinks he is, why stop him? And sure, the film might be saturated with a cornucopia of violent scenes that through every crunch, snap, crackle, and pop, everything looks and feels authentic. The action scenes on the ice, the fighting scenes that Doug has with several other enforcers on the team, has that sense of realism, like what you would expect to feel if you were to fight on the ice with another enforcer. The blood, the sounds of the punching, the release of the helmets, and hey, hockey is a pretty violent contact sport in itself. Injuries do happen, and they happen quite frequently. But underneath all that hardcore action that you see in this movie, Goon is definitely played from the heart, as we have very well fleshed out characters, and that the human interest elements are truly something for fans who are into watching character-driven movies, something that we could be invested in. There is no team movie about who's winning or losing, or about an underdog team pulling all the stops at the last minute to conquer the championship. This sports movie doesn't have that kind of cliche. It's about a rags to riches story of Doug's rise to fame, a carving life on his own. While his parents and his brother tries to kind of like make him change his mind, he's not planning on changing his mind. He's going his own way. He's going his own direction. And I say, good for him. So one day, like I said, he watches a hockey game with his friend Pat, played by Jay Baruchel, who takes a pleasure of calling out rival hockey teams and belittling them. One player who was not amused by Pat's obnoxious ways makes his way over to them and threatens to annihilate Pat. But then Doug intervenes and clobbers the player, going so far as to even split his own helmet. So some scouts take notes, and the next thing you know, Doug has now become a hockey player. Not a goal scorer, not a defense kind of guy, not a goalie, but an enforcer, a muscle for hire. And though he wasn't born to skate, he's not on for that reason. He's there to take down rival teammates and pose a threat on the team so that his team could become winning championship material. The character side of the story stems from Doug's somewhat privileged lifestyle. He's frequently pressured by his parents, played by Eugene, Levy, and Ellen David, that he has so much potential. Being that his father and brother, Ira, played by David Paetkau, are both doctors, Doug understands that he will never excel to the levels of success, and that his new role in professional hockey is a dream he never saw coming. It's like they can try their best to pressure and persuade him into thinking that he's got all there is to handle, but he has found a true calling of his own that doesn't necessarily require academic or brain thought. He's going out there, he's putting on a show, he's entertaining the fans, while at the same time is acting as a muscle for hire for his professional, well, minor league hockey team. It was quite a surprise to see Liev Schreiber, in an unexpected surprise, to play a supporting role as the rival goon Ross the Boss Shea. Ray was once admired by Doug, but now that they're on opposing teams, we all know that sooner or later they will likely have a showdown in the end. So although Ross may have a lot of praise for Doug, it isn't a surprise that these two are going to be going knuckle to knuckle, mano a mano, by the time we reach the climax of the movie. Sure, we are aware that the most contagious thing about hockey, like other sports, is that concussions have been greatly observed and deeply concerned by players, coaches, physicians, and the higher-ups in sports organizations. But here in Goon, we look at a different era in hockey before it became more watched and more watered down than it is today. These days, you don't see too many goons going out at it and just going on for fighting. No, they kind of tone down on the violence. They are making sure that once things go out of hand, the referees are free to intervene and to put them into the penalty box if they have to. While this is happening, Doug eventually befriends a player by the name of Xavier Laflamme, played by Marc-Andre Grondin, a star player who's getting in on age, who serves as his protection from the other goons. It feels as if the restrictions of violence in this era was catatonic. It would appear that Doug's position would be that he'd spend a portion of his time in the penalty box. The brutality depicted here is through the roof. So maybe 2011 might be a different time than today, but still, at one time, like I said, enforcers in hockey were greatly praised. They still are today, but they've also been forced to tone down because they all have to sort of learn to score goals and get assists just as much as the forwards and the defensemen do. What I like too is that this movie does have a nice, subtle, romantic comedy touches that concentrate on Doug and his relationship with the promiscuous Eva, played by Alison, who admits that she's attracted to big, sweaty hockey players whose bruises and blood are sexier than their tattoos. What I liked too is that Pill's comic relief complements perfectly, as she's the manipulator behind the naive nature of Doug's lovable characteristics. Usually, in a lot of comedies, most women in comedies are usually often looked upon as the straight characters, while most of the comic relief come from the male counterparts. Well, here we kind of see a little bit of a different side to this. I mean, Eva has just as good comical timing as any other guy. And even though, yes, she openly admits that she's not always 100% honest in her relationships with men, being that she prefers big, sweaty hockey guys, she is trying to do her best in any way possible to probably, hopefully, stick to a monogamous relationship with Doug, being that, he's got such a sweet personality that you just gotta love him. I mean, hell, this guy looks like a big, lovable teddy bear with muscle. That's kind of like just who he is. And Eva does not want to sort of tarnish Doug's lovable characteristics or try to upstage him in any way, shape, or form. And that she thinks that maybe Doug might be the keeper or the person she always wanted, because he's just so lovable and sensitive. She'll will be more than willing to not sleep around with other hockey players, and that she may have found her true love in Doug. So, to debunk the negative stereotypes that enforcers are all muscles and no brains is a complete and total misnomer. Take, for example, we have a former hockey player named George Parros, who played 9 seasons in the NHL and played in many different teams before retiring as a Montreal Canadian in 2014. George Parros, he was strong as an ox, but he was definitely far from being as dumb as one. So one of the big weaknesses in this movie is that, yes, they still kind of fall into the category of big dumb jocks, when really people should learn to realize that a lot of athletic people, or like you rather prefer to call them as jocks, well, academically, a lot of them are very, very strong, and most of them are on the honor system. Well, George Parros, even just saying that he was on the honor system is also a bit of a misnomer, or a bit of an understatement. Because let me tell you something, he also had muscles, but he also had brains to match. He may have been as strong as an ox, but he was far from being as dumb as one, as he was actually educated at Princeton University and majored in economics with a 3.18 GPA and scored 1,250 on his SATs. This truly counteracts the big dumb jock analogy to the max. It also should be noted that Goons was based off of the non-fiction memoirs titled Goon, The True Story of the Unlikely Journey into Minor League Hockey, which was, of course, based off of the novel by Adam Fratazio and Doug Smith, and it is kind of loosely based off of Doug Smith's journey from being a bouncer who had very little to offer in life to becoming one of the main big stars in the minor league hockey, not for his goal scoring, not for his defensive skills or his offensive skills, but for being a muscle for hire and taking his gifts with him wherever he went. Doug Smith, of course, played 10 years in the minor league hockey on various teams between 1988 to 1998, and has done other lines of profession, including being a police officer, an author, and a coach in high school, and in the minor league affiliations. So to say that this guy was an underachieving loser, that would be an understatement, and that would be an criminally unjustified to somebody who thinks that. Just because you may be muscles doesn't mean you don't have brains to match. And it seems like that this Doug Smith, who probably may have came from subtle, humble beginnings, actually managed to turn his life around by gaining the experience and confidence he needed when he was a member of a minor league hockey team in Massachusetts. Because let's face it, after his run, he must have gained some exceptional fame by doing all these other line of jobs too, like a police officer, an author, a high school coach, and a minor league coach. So, he pretty much has had a pretty good, rewarding life for a guy who was never really considered conventionally intellectual. So I thought that there was a lot of good things about this movie. This movie was far from perfect. You know, it had its flaws. It was very low budget. It's not the greatest hockey movie of all time. There was, of course, that big whole cliche about, big dumb jocks, which is totally untrue. Just because you are athletic and you're a jock doesn't necessarily mean you're stupid. You could probably even have things what you would call nerd level intelligence, although you just have muscle to boot. Not all jocks are dumb, and not all scrawny little guys are geniuses either. But still, nonetheless, this movie does have that stereotype, which is kind of a sad thing. But overall, there's not a lot to complain about in this movie. Like I said, it was kind of low budget. It probably was kind of short. And, some characters are a little more developed than the others. But it did work out pretty much in the end. So if I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would definitely give Goon a 6.5 out of 10. So, I do recommend you to see it. I don't expect a lot of diehard hockey fans going to see it, because you're not going to see championship games. You're not going to see a plethora of goal scoring and a lot of exciting plays. No, you're going to be seeing a lot of Goon action if you are into those kind of rock'em sock'em hockey type fight stuff. But nonetheless, it's still a good watch. You'll probably have some good laughs. You'll probably love the adrenaline's rush. And, with the hockey season, it's coming back in January. So don't worry, we will have hockey action coming to you. But it will give you a different perspective of how you look at enforcers or slash goons on the ice. And I think this movie could probably be like the wake-up call, if that's possible. So I guess this ends my ride review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be polite, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.